for this meeting of the Education Resources Committee of the 2nd of May 2023. I can see that we have present Councillor Allison, Councillor Anderson is also present. I have apologies from Councillor Bradley. I see that Councillor Clark is here and also Councillor Cowie. Councillor Fagan. No, I have nothing from Councillor Fagan. Councillor Ferguson, I see that you're participating remotely. Councillor Frame, I understand Councillor Frame was having some difficulties, so I'll keep an eye on that and mark when she's back in the meeting. Councillor Fulton, I have apologies from Councillor Fulton, and I understand that Councillor Donnelly is substituting, and I see that Councillor Donnelly is at the meeting. Councillor Gray. No, I have nothing from Councillor Gray. Councillor Hamilton is here, as is Councillor Horsham. Councillor Johnson-Dempsey is participating. I have apologies from Councillor Keat. I see that Councillor Kerr is here. Councillor Lambie. I don't see anything from Councillor Lambie.
Oh, that's Gavin.
Oh, is Councillor Keat participating remotely then? Yes. I'll just have
specifically that's Alfie.
I'll just have Councillor Keat participating remotely then. That's ideal. Councillor Kerr is also here. Councillor Lambie, we were just checking if Councillor Lambie was here, and yes, Councillor Lambie is here. So I'll mark him as present. Councillor Lockhart is also here. Councillor Logan is here, as is Councillor Loudon, Councillor McCallan, Councillor McGeever, Councillor Razak, Councillor Scott, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Walker and Councillor Watson. Moving on to external representatives, I have apologies from John Mulligan. I see that Dr Nagi Skanda is present. Gillian Coulter. No, nothing from Gillian Coulter. I see that Jennifer Gaffney is present. I have apologies from Joan Lennon, Hilary Kirby and Christine Hall. There are a number of officers present at the meeting, and with that I'll pass back to you, Chair, for the business.
Thanks very much, Pauline. As we can hear, Alfie and Gavin are certainly present, so thanks very much. Is there any declarations of interest? Nope, no bother. And can we take the minutes of the previous meeting? Can we be approved as a correct record? Happy? Yep, thank you very much. Moving on to the monitoring items, Education Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 2022-23, pages 15 to 18. And can I ask Louise to take this paper?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. This is the fourth report for committee this financial year covering the revenue budget from the period 1st of April through to the 24th of February, which is period 12 of the new financial year. Paragraph 4 on page 15 contains updated information in relation to the Scottish Attainment Challenge Fund and spend and commitment to date for the PEF Fund as at the 24th of February is 9.849 million against the budget, with 1.69 million still to spend, and this includes all known staffing through to the 31st of March. PEF is committed to spend by the end of the academic year, and it is estimated that 1.5 million will be carried forward at the 31st of March to be used in the period April to June of the next financial year, and this will be transferred to reserves at the year end, and schools continue to maximise spend in line with their school improvement plans. In relation to the Strategic Equity Fund, commitment to spend to date and commitment is 1.376 million, with 97,000 still to spend. Turning to the main financial implications of the report, paragraph 6.1 on page 16, the resources reporting a break-even position after the approved transfers to reserve, which is the 1.5 million for PEF. The break-even position reflects the net effect of early years core budgets underspends, partially offset by overspends relating to mainstream transport and school placements, which are demand-led. For the mainstream transport position this year, the updated impact for 22-23 in terms of additional costs and overspend is 2.49 million, and we're now able to quantify that, and this has been managed within the overall resource position this financial year. Learning recovery is also provided within this position, and this was funding provided by the government over the past few years that have been carried forward to meet our existing commitments. And the level of spend this year is 5.763 million, and this is within the reported position. This is used to cover the increased staffing across schools and services, the continuation of the cleaning and hygiene within the schools to June 22, and the digital inclusion programmes, primarily around the increased staffing in our schools. There is further 1.288 million available that will be used to support the staff costs from April to June 23, and this is a continuation of the strategic programmes, and this is all committed, and we'll see the full use of the learning recovery funding next year. In relation to the current position at period 12, the 24th of February, the resource is again reporting a break-even position after the approved transfers to reserves. Variance explanations are outlined in Appendix A to the report, with the main areas representing an underspend within early years course staffing, again due to vacancies and turnover, over-recovery of early years fees, and both these areas are supporting the overspend in transport costs I've referred to and the cost of external school placements. We have our standard budget environments that are proposed at the bottom of Appendix A, and these reflect movements to education's budget from the period the 29th of December through to the 24th of February. These reflect the creation of external budget for external funding, transfers between resources for project delivery. Budgets are realigned to reflect how services are delivered and money is spent, and also the standard realignment of our budgets as school spend within the devolved management scheme and also our EMA payments. So if I can refer the committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the forecast to the 31st of March of a break-even position for education after the approved transfers to reserves be noted, that a break-even position on education resources revenue budget period 12, which is the 24th of February this year, as detailed in Appendix A, is also noted, and that the proposed budget environments are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Louise. So the recommendations are on page 15. Is there any questions? Can't see any. So can I ask committee to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 4, Education Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 2022 to 23, which is pages 19 to 22. Can I ask Lorraine to speak to this report? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, committee. Agenda item 4 then on page 19 is the standard capital budget monitoring report. It's the 4th for the old financial year, and it reflects the budget and spend to the 24th of February 2023. So that's accounting period 12. Section 3 then on page 19 gives you the background to the report and explains that we had the overall base budget programme in the capital programme for the year 22-23, and we've adjusted that throughout the year, and the budget reported at the last meeting of the committee on the 14th of February was 13.918 million, and the budget hasn't changed since that last meeting. So section 5 then goes on to give you the detailed financial implications. Section 5.1 notes again the resources total capital programme for the year of the 13.918. And in terms of anticipated spend for the year, section 5.2 explains that current working projections at the time of writing the report showed spend of 14.5 million, and that the year-end position is actually reflective of that outturn as we've been working through over the last couple of weeks. That therefore gives you an overspend of around about £600,000. This includes the additional in-year spend on the Jackton Primary School project, which is a multi-year project. And as noted in section 5.2, the overall funding package for this project is in place with an allocation into next financial year. So any additional spend that we're making in 22-23 will be offset by the budget available in the new financial year. That said, while we have the additional spend on Jackton, section 5.3 explains that we actually have reduced spend on a number of projects listed in that paragraph. Spend in 2022-23 was simply less than anticipated, really just because of timing issues. The budget for those projects is now required in 23-24 rather than 22-23. So similarly, funding for these projects will carry forward into next financial year. In terms of section 5.4, I'm just noting there that the position is currently being finalised, as I mentioned. We will report the final position for the overall capital programme to the next Executive Committee in June, and we'll bring that to the Education Committee thereafter. Section 5.5 then on page 20 notes the period 12 position. We had anticipated spend to date of 9.694 at the end of February, and the spend at that point was 10.017. So we were slightly ahead of profile, mainly reflecting the timing of payments on a number of projects, including the new Skylark Nursery and the Robert Smiley Primary School at Lark Hall, which is now complete, and also the Education ICT project. So if I can refer members back to section 2 of the report and ask that the Education Resources Capital Programme of 13.918 million, expenditure to the end of February of 10.017 million, and that the projected outturn of 14.5 million be noted. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lorraine. The recommendations are on page 19. Can I ask if there's any questions? No, none. Can I ask the committee to agree the report? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, the workforce monitoring from December 2022 to February 2023, which is pages 23 to 30. Can I ask Eileen to speak to that, please?
Thanks, Chair. So this is the standard employment information report for the resource covering the period December 2022 to February 2023. So section 4.1 outlines attendance statistics for committee, and the details are in Appendix 1. So the absence rate for the resource for February 23 is 5.4% compared to a council-wide figure of 5.9%. This figure has increased by 0.3 compared to the previous month, and compared to last year, the figure has increased by 0.1%. So the projected annual average for absence for the resource is 4.7% compared to a council-wide figure of 5.8%. Moving on, sections 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2, and the main points are that during the period there was 495 occupational health referrals, there was 9 disciplinary hearings, there was no grievances or dignity at work issues raised. There was 336 accidents or incidents recorded during the period, and there was 61 leavers, and 46% of them completed exit interviews. Details of posts that became vacant are in Appendix 2A. So there was 188 posts became vacant. 109 of these posts will be filled. 2 will be held pending a review of service, and there was 77 that were ended on a fixed term basis. And just to make committee aware, that was due to a housekeeping exercise. That number seems higher than usual, and it was a housekeeping exercise in the school support service. So I'm referring committee back to section 2.0 and asking that the workforce monitoring information for education resources for the period December 2022 to February 2023 be noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. So the recommendations are on page 23. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Page 24, 4.3, I noticed that the big rise of 116 accidents/incidents. Is there an explanation for this, and is there anything we're doing off the back of it to address it? Thanks.
Eileen.
In terms of the background to these figures, I had said that these were the accidents and incidents that are recorded during the period, so they didn't all actually take place during the period. So actually, when you look at the detail, there was 131 incidents that took place during the period rather than the larger figure that's reported. There's some work going to address it in terms of the lag in reporting that we're seeing. That's why you're seeing a big rise in this particular period, because there was a number that should have been reported in a previous period and then they've carried forward to this period.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. That was something I had raised in the pre-agenda, so thank you for clarifying. Is there any more questions? No. Okay. Can I ask the committee to agree the report? Thank you very much. Moving on to the items for decision, the Education Resources Plan 2023 to 24, which is pages 31 to 52. And can I ask Des to take this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The purpose of this report is to present the Education Resources Plan to committee this morning. The resource plan sets out the objectives and actions taken forward by Education Resources in 2023-24, and this is shown in Appendix 1 on page 35. The resource plan is built around the strategic priorities shown as strategy on a page, which is shown on page 37. And it's worth highlighting this morning that these priorities themselves have been influenced and shaped by the voice of young people, parents and carers, staff, and a range of other stakeholders. In paragraph 3.4, we describe how the resource plan aligns to the council plan, as well as a methodology for reporting on progress to this committee at periods Q2 and Q4. This is commonly known as a golden thread, and is a key feature of our performance management and scrutiny process, where transparency and accountability are core features. So what are the building blocks for this resource plan? Certainly, there is no doubt we have a highly dedicated workforce who do some inspirational and amazing things to support children, young people and families. Creating inspirational learning environments, transforming the educational experiences of all learners, and building on the strength of our partnerships with parents and carers, our professional associations, trade unions and our communities, and recognising the achievements of all our learners and staff is something that we wish to deliver on during the coming year. And no doubt, like this committee, we want all of our children and young people to receive the best education possible and to achieve their potential through high quality learning experiences. So our focus again will be on taking forward the drivers in the National Improvement Framework, and we have set out in section 2 of the resource plan on pages 38 and 39 what the focus will be for the year ahead, and how we will achieve this through the 19 measures shown in section 4A of the resource plan and the 36 actions shown in section 4B on pages 43 to 49. And I think it's fair to say that the support of this Education Resources Committee in helping to determine the priorities for education in South Lanarkshire is also acknowledged and welcomed. It is also worth noting that our priorities are the building blocks for our school improvement plans and are closely aligned to those identified by young people in the Youth Strategy Report, which you will hear about later this morning. So, Chair, the committee is asked this morning to approve the following recommendations: that the resource plan attached as Appendix 1 be approved, and that the resource plan be uploaded onto the Council's website following consideration by this committee, and that following committee approval, all Council resource plans will be presented to the Executive Committee on the 21st of June 2023 for noting, and that the progress reports on the resource plan be provided at Q2 and Q4 to future meetings of the Education Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Des. The recommendations are on page 31. Councillor Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Des, for going through that. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay, Chair. I might just do them both at the same time. The first one was on page 43 at point 3, which was about developing nurture provision. And the question was, I just happened to come across, sorry, that was me. Just happened to come across a document from Glasgow, which was guidelines for secondary schools in particular, which had, I'm going to try and move my phone and see if it's interference. Strange. In some ways, the document seems quite restrictive, and in other ways it was quite reassuring to have things down in black and white. It had certain stipulations about training for staff who were running a nurture group, process for people to gain access to a nurture group, a time limit for how long you can be expected to be there, and communication with parents and carers and the involvement that they could expect as well. I just wondered if we had something similar as an actual policy document for secondary school, or is it that something that we would look into And the second one was just a quick one. It was on page 46 at point 16. I just wondered if we could hear a bit more about the clinic to share best practice on ASN. Is that something that's going to be text-based, or is it going to be something that gives professionals a chance to speak to each other in this sort of format? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Katie. Anne, can you take both those?
Thank you. Just in relation to the Nurture document that has the Glasgow badge on it, you'll remember Frances Swinburne, who was one of our senior managers, pupil support, Mrs Nurture actually. She was heavily involved in contributing to that. So there was a range of contributors to the Glasgow document. What I would say is that right now here in South Lanarkshire, we are exploring the Nurture approach. I think some of the Nurture approaches are quite formal and restricted. And actually what we have found recently is that there has been staff absence in the area of Nurture. And if you're following a purist approach, you would not replace that staff member because the relationship can't be replicated, is what they would say. Now, we don't feel that that's satisfactory. So we're looking much more carefully at the Nurture approaches that we're using in the Nurture groups, and also working towards building nurturing approaches within the primary schools and in the secondary sector as well. So it all aligns with their attachment strategy too, and you know that the rate of staff development and work that's going on to support the attachment strategy. So we are taking a strategic approach, which is much more about building capacity than being purist and aligning ourselves to one particular approach. So that's really where we are in terms of Nurture. That piece of work is ongoing. Around the ASN clinics, that's been a recent development, and that really is about sharing issues which are related, without talking about individual cases, but sharing issues across professionals and seeking solutions across the group, if you like. So it does happen online. Folk can go on at a regular time and they can basically share the issue and seek potential solutions from their colleagues. So it's seen as a kind of positive problem-solving approach, if you like, to support the additional support needs of our children and young people. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for that. So if there's no other questions, nope, I will ask Mitty to agree the report. Thank you very much. Heading on to agenda item number 7, the review of the admissions policy for early learning childcare establishments, page 53 to 60. And can I ask Stuart to speak to this report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to outline the review of the policy for admissions of children into early learning and childcare, or ELC, establishments in South Lanarkshire, and that includes the process and the outcome of the consultation that took place, and also then to outline the admissions policy itself and the process for the allocation of places to local authority and funded provider establishments from August 2023. This is a paper that we bring every 2 years, and that's explained in section 3 on page 53, which sets out the statutory framework around ELC provision. And para 3.3 notes that requirement that we review the policy every 2 years, as I say. Section 3 then takes us through, I suppose, the evolution of statutory provision from targeted support for those in need pre-2000 through the introduction of 475 hours, which was then increased to 600 hours of early years for 3 and 4 year olds in 2014 and eligible 2-year-olds in 2015. And of course, the most recent expansion provided 1140 hours of funded early learning and childcare, and that was implemented in 2021, a significant expansion programme and a very successful one for the council, in that we can offer all parents now their entitlement to funded ELC, and we meet the requirements for quality, accessibility, flexibility and choice. On page 54, section 4 sets out the current admissions arrangements, with para 4.1 noting the council's commitment to make a place available the week following a child's 3rd birthday rather than the term following their birthday, which is the statutory entitlement. Para 4.2 notes the existing admissions arrangements, and we have an initial closing date for applications at the end of February. That enables parents to have their place for the following session confirmed, normally by the end of May or into the end of April or into the start of May. And of course, late or further admissions continue to be considered on a rolling basis monthly thereafter. On page 55, the remainder of section 4 then relates to feedback from the consultation, and some key points are noted in 4.4. including flexibility to access additional hours within the term time provision. Those hours supporting working parents or those undertaking training or study as a priority. The need also for flexibility around attendance patterns and also around split places. Para 4.5, I think is worth noting, it's a welcome endorsement of the recognition of the positive impact of the additional hours on South Lanarkshire children and their families. Moving on to section 5, which is on page 55 and 56. This sets out the proposal in terms of the additional hours offer, provision patterns based on a full week and also options for longer days too. Para 5.5 notes the additional requirement to allow deferred entry for children turning 4 from the start of term in August. We've seen a bit of a rise this year of around 10% in requests, from 380 or so in 21-22 to just over 420 this year. That's something we'll continue to monitor. Section 6 then points to Appendix 1 on page 58, and that contains the detail around prioritising places for our under 3s and the 3 to 5s. Across the piece, we are able to offer a high percentage of parents the first or their second choice of placement, but where there are issues, this policy forms the basis by which places are allocated. And I think, if you don't mind, I'll take a moment. We're just going through the current process. We had 7,246 places to allocate. Of those, 7,139 got the first choice. That's 98.5%. A further 83 got their second choice, 14 got their third, and then there were 10 who are in that will be the other category. And those fall into two distinct groups. Either those who we weren't able to give either the first, second, or third choice, and we'll continue to work with them, or it's families who indicated only a single choice and they didn't get that first choice. So we will continue to progress those 10. When we look at those priorities, you'll see that priority 1 essentially relates to vulnerable children. Priority 2 relates to children in the preschool year. Priorities 3 and 4 look at anti-preschool transfers and parental choice. And priorities 5 and 6 then relate to children who are resident out with South Lanarkshire itself. You'll also see on that page some further clarification of some of the questions or the matters that arise in terms of the sorts of inquiries elected members may receive from parents from time to time. Chair, I refer committee back to section 2 of the report on page 53 and ask for approval for the priorities for admission to all early learning and childcare establishments as detailed in Appendix 1. That the admissions policy and the process for the allocation of places to all early learning and childcare establishments be implemented from August 2023. And thirdly, that the admissions policy for early learning and childcare establishments be endorsed and then referred to Executive Committee for formal approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stuart. Thank you very much. So the recommendations are on page 53. Is there any questions? Can't see any. Oh, Susan. Oh, I'm sorry.
Not a question, just to say it's very pleasing to hear the report on the introduction of the 1,140 hours and how that's progressed so well, and how the work the council's put in there, and that people are, now getting the huge range of options you've got there. It's very impressive, and I thought, what a huge amount of work must have went into that. So it's great to hear that, and that people are benefiting from that. So that's really good work. Thanks for that.
Councillor Allison.
Just sorry.
I think he's back.
Okay.
Nope. Sometimes you want to silence him, sometimes he just doesn't turn up. Alec, if you're... Yep, there you go.
Yes, right.
That's
Can you hear
him.
me?
Yep, that's you.
Aye, sorry, what was I going to ask? Yeah, Stuart, regarding nursery provision, is that I've had an issue where they haven't been able to supply and they're putting down staff shortages as the reason. Is that happening very often, or not? I mean, the position was asked for extra sessions in July, but there was none available due to staff shortages. Is that happening very often? in a 52-week nursery?
Councillor Alison, that's not something I'm aware of as an ongoing issue, but I'd be interested to hear a wee bit more detail, maybe out with the committee and find out exactly what's going on so we can pick that one up and make sure that we're straightened out in terms of that.
Okay, I'll pass it on to you, Stuart. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Yep. Okay, so if there is no further questions, no, can I ask the committee to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. On to the items for noting. Numeracy and mathematics progress report, pages 61 to 66. The recommendations are on page 1. Oh. Try to silence me, Pauline. Is there any questions? No questions. I will ask the committee to agree the report. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 9, the Curriculum for Quality Improvement Service Literacy Improvement Plan 2022-23, pages 67 to 72. The recommendations are on page 67. Is there any questions? No questions. I'll ask the committee to note the report. Thank you. Agenda item number 10, Pilot Hybrid Learning Programme 2023-24, pages 73 to 78. The recommendations are on page 73. Is there any questions? Councillor Loudon.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. I think this sounds really promising, and goodness hasn't technology come so far that this is even an option now. Obviously, for all the points about reducing taxi transport costs, more equitable for rural areas and so on. One quick question is obviously it's badged as a pilot here, but we are talking about quite a big spend per school, 11.5k per school. So the question is really just, is this going to be evaluated afterwards in terms of how the technology is working? Will we see that? And is there going to be an option to change that tech to upgrade it if need be? Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Councillor Loudon. Yes, it's badged as a pilot. Our intent is to run this to extend and expand. As with all things, we will monitor how things are going, both from a technology point of view this session, but also from an engagement and an outcomes perspective as well. And it is a fair investment in the grand scheme of things. We think it's money well spent, and it is an avenue we want to pursue. I suppose in terms of risk when you're running a pilot, we are looking at what's happened elsewhere. The solutions are out there. It does seem to be sustainable and something we want to move on. And of course, I think the framing this as a pilot acknowledges that advanced higher is only the start of this. There are other types of courses and programmes that we want to make accessible as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart. Mark.
Thanks, Chair. A very quick one. I having studied at distance before myself, I think it's an absolutely wonderful thing, and it does open up options. And I think students at advanced higher level would be more than capable of doing so. Just a quick one. I notice it does say in the papers that schools will include the subjects on offer in their option choices for the following year. I'm just wondering, because presumably the schools that don't offer certain subjects that are offered elsewhere, they maybe don't have teaching staff that are all that familiar with the course content. Will there be a mechanism in place whereby pupils who may be keen can be identified, they can be flagged up, and they can be given a kind of oversight of what the course involves and why it might benefit them in their career options if the school that they happen to be in doesn't have someone who's an expert in that particular subject area?
Good question, Mark. Stuart?
Yeah, absolutely. All of the normal checks and balances that we'd have in place around the discussions at options time are there. What this does is simply extend the availability. And actually, we already have well embedded consortium arrangements for young people to access courses elsewhere, right now mainly via taxi. This just allows us to remove some of that transport and the logistical part. But all of the pastoral bit, all of the support in terms of careers progression and advice will still be there. And it is badged hybrid because there will be some face-to-face in there as well. And we do recognise the impact of the rapport and the relationship between a teacher and a young person, and you don't always get that in the remote environment. So these things are the sorts of things we'll be interested in getting feedback on as we progress. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it is a really positive report, and you just couldn't have imagined that even a few years ago. So it is really, especially for the rural area. I know myself that has been an issue that's been brought up at parent councils and stuff like that before. So excellent, and it'll be really interesting to see how that's taken forward. So thank you very much. I'll ask, if there's no more questions, the committee to note the report. Thank you very much. Agenda item 11 is the Youth Strategy 2022 to 2025, pages 79 to 108. The recommendations are on page 79. Can I ask Ross Clark to ask his question?
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of good work going on working with young people, and it's really important that a lot of this stuff is done with them rather than for them. I can see that throughout the youth strategy. I think I've said before, young people, they're not just our future, they're also our present and needs to be involved in decisions now, not just on issues that affect young people, but anything. And more specifically, on the Youth Housing Forum and the Young People's Sports Panel, how active are these right now, and what do we plan to do to expand them and boost participation and activity with them? Thank you.
Thanks. Anne.
Yep, I'm through now. The youth strategy lists some of the key achievements of the previous strategy, and they're listed on page 89. And you'll see there that you're correct that young people have been involved in the Young People's Sports Panel and Housing Tenant Forums as well. So where a priority has been identified, where it's relevant for them to become involved, then they have become involved. The new priorities are within the body of the paper, and again, engagement will depend on the priorities that have been identified by the young people themselves. What I would say about our young people is that they're very bold, and nothing stops them in terms of strategic bodies, whether they work at a local level or a national level. They will absolutely make contact and be proactive in securing communication and consultation with the people that they need to talk to achieve their objectives. So I would hope to reassure the member that the young people will be actively involved at whatever level, consulting and communicating with the bodies that are appropriate to them to fulfil the priorities.
Thank you. Just swiftly on that, do you know how active these the Housing Forum and the Sports Panel are at the moment?
Oh, no, okay.
I'm currently speaking that to me now. I can certainly check that out and get back to you. It'll be aligned with the priorities they're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. If there is no further questions, can I ask committee to note the report? Thank you very much. The agenda item number 12 is the school leaver destinations 2021 to 2022, which is pages 109 to 112. The recommendations are on page 109. Is there any questions? Councillor Loudon.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Some really good information in here. It's good to see it all in this format. I was having a look at table 3 and 4. I'm not getting on with these microphones today.
Could I just say, if you've got your phone near the microphone, it'll affect it. So if you wouldn't mind just moved it. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson will look after it. So sorry, back to where I was. At table 1 on 4.3 on page 110, we've obviously got a breakdown of leaver destinations there. And then on table 3 and 4, a bit further down, we can see the gap for young people in more deprived data zones and for our care experience young people. It was just a request at some point, could we maybe have a bit of a deeper dive on where exactly that positive destination gap is sitting? So what I mean, is it in employment, or is it in further education, or is it in training? And is there a difference between all of the positive destinations that we would hope young people would manage to get to? Are there any significant gaps in some areas and then a smaller gap in another area, if that makes sense? So it's a request for some more information on that would be good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, of course, I'm more than happy to do that. I'll work with the youth employability team and see if we can get a more detailed breakdown. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 14, there is no urgent business. And just before I close the meeting, we're all very sad to know that this is Tony's last education meeting because he's decided to leave us. I leave Gavin here for 3 months and this is what happens. So I'm blaming him. But yeah, no, Tony, honestly, like every day is really sad. Try to silence me again, Pauline. Every day is really, really sad about you leaving, and because you're just one of the good guys, basically. Tony's been here, I think, is it 27 years? 27 years as a teacher, head of service, and now director. And I know that all the elected members really appreciate and know if we come to you that if we came to you that we would get an answer, and even if it wasn't an answer we would get it with a smile. So thank you so much for your service, and I really hope that your new exciting career is fulfilled as this one has been. So thank you very much. Yep, Katie.
Thank you very much, Chair. On behalf of our SNP group and myself, I'd like to say a few quick words, if that's okay, about Tony, as crowns before my very eyes in a school, our very own king of education. And we're not going to let you forget about that one. We've had a few interesting times together along the way. Usually started with a phone call to say, just to let you know, don't worry, but you might have heard, but I'd have never once come off one of those calls without thinking, actually, it's going to be fine. And if it's not going to be fine, then it will be in the end, because Tony's in charge of it. And he's steered the department with professionalism and tact and expertise. A few years ago, one of my kids came home and said that Tony had popped his head into the classroom. And he was really interested in what we were doing, Mum. He was asking all sorts of questions. And obviously my first response was, oh, I hope you were behaving. And my second was, absolutely, he's the big boss. And he would love to hear what you were doing, because that's what it's all about for him. I know how much he really cares about it, and he wants to know that you're getting on well. I think anyone who has ever taught always jokes that they've got a book in them. And I know that Tony really, really has. And I fully expect a signed copy of that book one day when it's published, and maybe a few citations along the way, not least for that story about that science corridor and that group of S1s who shall remain nameless, although may have included a Loudon. Tony, thank you very much for everything. And I say that both as a councillor and as a South Lanarkshire parent. Thank you for all of the work that you've done in this committee and elsewhere. I hope you can look back on your time with pride and what you've achieved, and also what you've helped others to achieve in the department as well. We've been so extremely lucky to have you, and I'd like to wish you all the very best for the future.
Can I ask Councillor Razak to come in as well, please?
Tony, I'd like to thank you. I was chair of education for a short while. Shadow chair of education for a short while, just a few years ago. And the thing that I did find with yourself was that you're really, really good at responding. And even now, whenever there's been any issues, I think you've been absolutely fantastic when it comes to responses. And I'd like to wish you the best of luck. I think you'll smash your new job, and I think it's a huge loss for us. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Tony, this is probably not the first time that you're going, the last time you're going to have to do this, but do you want to say a few words?
Thanks very much. Maybe it's just me feeling slightly emotional. I think in terms of the the reflections. I'll try. It feels like the beginning of a farewell tour. That hasn't quite dawned on me that this will happen, but maybe today sets that out in a proper sense. Probably my reflection is that South Lanarkshire elected members, particularly in the Education Committee, are fully engaged about our children and young people and care deeply about it. And it's not about politics. It's about our children. You know, it doesn't matter your politics, although that's important to you. The only thing I've ever reflected is that people care deeply, that they want a great education for children and young people. And I think that that's what we've managed within the context of this Education Committee. And I'm sure that will continue as I head out the door, and whoever comes in this seat does that as well. So it's a thanks to yourself. Thanks to yourself for being advocates for children and young people and our schools, our early years and our youth learning as well, because they benefit from it as well. I can think of no better place to work in as a council around education for children and young people, and I think that's reflected right across the way for how many of our staff feel as well. So it's a huge thank you from me.
Thanks very much. And on that note, if there's nobody else, I will close today's meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.